I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Rod Jansen. I'm a member of the board of Eceee. I was one of the few people who have been trying to organize this conference. I'm president of Energy Efficiency and Industrial Processes, and I have my own blog, Energy and Demand, which is actually a sponsor here, no, I guess I'm a supporter. And but it's been a blog I've now had for 11 or 12 years, and I put out a newsletter on a Sunday morning, which people always thought was crazy, but I get so many people reading it. And I send it out just before I do a 10-kilometer run. So anyway, that's the only reason I do it is because it's convenient for me. Anyway, we're going to be talking about financing. And it was about 4 or 5 years ago for Sustainable Energy Week in Brussels that I moderated. We had a panel. Can you believe this? We had a panel of 10 speakers, and we had one guest speaker. And Sustainable Energy Week, I think you mainly have 2 hours, hour and a half or something like that. We had Mr. Shevkovich, who at that time was in charge of the Europe Union, Energy Union. He was supposed to speak for 5 minutes, and I had 10 panelists, as I mentioned. He spoke for 45. But when he's one of the commissioners, and he's a very senior commissioner, you couldn't say no. So this was one of the dilemmas. Today we're going to be doing something a little challenging because all of you have been dealing with financing one way or other in your own country, trying to figure how do I help those SMEs get funding? How do I help that cement factory? This morning we were talking about cement factories. How do we get support for them for what they're trying to do to decarbonize and improve their energy efficiency? And about 7, 8 years ago, guys, getting older, we created Energy Efficiency Financial Institutions Group, which was co-supported by DG Energy and also UNEP Financial Initiative. And we've been going ever since then. We've had 3 different phases, and we're in the 3rd phase right now, where we've actually had different working groups working on. There's a working group looking at how to integrate the energy efficiency principle into financial practices. But today what we're doing is we're having 4 speakers coming from different directions, but all leading to the same thing. I mean, they all want this to succeed. Well, everybody in this room wants it to succeed. But we have Robert Noy from DG Ener, and he was involved very early days of EFIG. And he left for a little while to work on eco design and other things, and then he's come back into the same unit that's handling all of this. So it's his unit that's struggling to sort of see what the strategy, what are we trying to do for financing? What can the Commission do? What can DG Ener do to help industrial energy efficiency? And industrial energy efficiency went through a funny phase because at the beginning of EFIG, they wanted to just do buildings. That's changed. We don't need to go over that history. We've got Bettina Dorndorf from KfW. Now, she's at KfW, the German bank, state bank, but she played an incredibly important role in EFIG at the beginning because she had been seconded from Germany to work in DG Ener. So she was very involved in that, but even more recently has been heavily involved in the EU taxonomy from different angles. And we did have a small little group in EFIG, and we've provided some support, even though the timing was a bit awkward, but we did provide support. But I mean, Bettina, the last time we had an industry conference, she actually gave a paper on taxonomy. So nobody knows it better than she does. She'll argue with that. Tatiana Bastiles is from the European Investment Bank, and she's played a big role in EFIG all the time. Boy, this is a broken record already. We're to just EFIG. No. But she's and she's going to be talking about SMEs and how they're dealing with it. And and I think we all know that the real agony right now is how do we get to support the SMEs to improve their efficiency, improve their competitiveness, deal with the whole decarbonization issue, get to net zero. So these are big topics. And then we have Georgia Caroli, finally, but not least, I teased her. Last but not least, because she's involved with the EU Innovation Fund, and it gets its funding from ETS money. But I think it's really important for you to have a better understanding of it. And if you're coming from companies, the fact that the companies I've talked, a lot of the sectors, we are not going to meet our 2050 targets unless we innovate more. What we have today isn't enough. And so we've got to take things to a new level. And but at the same time, we've when we have innovation, and I see this, we've also got to make the banks feel comfortable that this innovation is to minimize the risk of it. And that's one of the reasons why we have the commission there doing this sort of thing, so that we can actually support and give a level of confidence. And so the funds like that are important. What I want from you is to ask questions. I want this to be I don't want you to leave this room and something you don't understand. And if somebody uses an acronym that you don't understand, let's hear about it, okay? And if once the speakers come up, they're going to be interacting here, and I've told them I want them to interact amongst themselves. And I will be asking questions related to this. What we're hoping to do from this is actually produce some chairman's conclusions from this workshop that we can actually distribute through the ECEE networks, that we possibly can send to the industry committee of the European Parliament and to the different institutions so that they understand what's going on. I've also said, Robert is from the Commission. We've had 2.5 years of not even being able to have a coffee together. And so he wants to hear from you as well. Okay, so he needs as much well, all of them need as much feedback as possible. So so if something comes that doesn't quite fit with what you're doing at home, let us know, okay? And I think this is quite important. Robert, I will please start with you. This is very, very casual, but you've got the best overview of what's going on in financing, both in terms of what the Commission or the EU as a whole is offering, and what we really need. And obviously, one of the reasons why EFIG was created was to sort of, how do we access private money more? That the public sector simply can't do it. And so I'd like to just get your views on this, a few minutes for you to give us some ideas of how you see it.
From a European Commission perspective and a European Union perspective, we are very far removed from the day-to-day realities of industry and of SMEs dealing with growing their business, with surviving in the current context. And so the questions you ask about, what do SMEs need and what can we do, then we are far removed from that. But having said that, we are, of course, we have a role, fortunately. And I think the first role that we have is one of policy setting, of objective setting. And then we look at 2050 decarbonization of the European economy, 2030 minus 55% greenhouse gas emission reduction. So that is important in order to sort of sketch out the pathway. Where do we need to end up in 2030, 2050, and whatever happens in between? What we are also doing, of course, is setting policy, making directives and regulations and all of that stuff that people should normally follow in order to get us there. And in the area of energy efficiency, there's the Energy Efficiency Directive, there's the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, there's also renewables, which plays into that sphere. And so there, I think we have over the years and decades built up quite a robust sort of policy framework that supports industry, even though industry often says, yeah, but it's costing us money. And we're saying, yes, that's maybe true, but in particular in the world of energy efficiency, that money comes back if you save. So it's that. It's the objectives, it's the policy framework, and of course it's also financing, what we're talking about here today. And in the panel this morning, I showed a slide with all of the sort of financing programs and instruments that we have in place at European level that is targeted or are targeted at the industry. And so there's quite a lot of money available. There's many programs that's in the form of technical assistance, in the form of grants, in the form of financial instruments. So a lot is already available there. But what we are also struggling with, as you were saying, is how do we sort of bridge that gap between what we put in place at European level and what people need on the ground. And that is partly what inspired us to set up, if you wish, EFIC. So this group of people from industry, from the financial sector, to help us understand, well, what is lacking in this market? What are we missing? Where are the gaps? Or, are there instruments missing? Are there people missing in certain places? And that work has progressed. It has focused on buildings and on industry. And that has been very, very useful for us because it has shown, for example, de-risking. One of the big issues in energy efficiency financing is what is the risk for a bank to give a loan to somebody investing in energy efficiency? Is that money going to come back? Are these savings really going to be realized? So in that context, we've set up a database with over 10,000 projects, financial projects in energy efficiency, both in industry and buildings, that people can look at. It's online and see, well, what has happened in this world? How are these projects? How have they run? What has been the return on investment? What has been the risk, the default, et cetera, et cetera. That information is all out there, and that helps banks, we hope, to be more confident in this area. Now, we're not there. I mean, it's clear that much more is needed, and we see also from the recommendations coming out of the latest report, which will soon be published, of EFIC on industry and financing, is that the way to these SMEs, who are they interacting with when they need finance? Are these financial interlocutors ready to offer them energy efficiency loans, for example? Do they understand what they're getting into? What might be the role of ESCOs, energy service companies, in an energy performance contracting in that world? So there are still a number of questions out there that we would like answers to. We would like to understand how we, as the European Commission at our level, can help in that world.
How do you balance energy, trying to find support for energy efficiency as opposed to renewables or other ways of decarbonizing? I mean, how do you, we have the energy efficiency first principle, but how do you integrate that?
So, I don't know if this is Chatham House.
No, it's actually being recorded.
Okay.
Okay,
well,
so no, you have to. I should have mentioned that at the beginning. This is being recorded, and well.
But it will not see the light of day.
Well, who knows what will happen.
Who knows? Okay. No, I was going to say. I mean, it's a bit every man for himself, and that sounds a bit. But of course, if you look at, let's take a very practical example: the response to the energy crisis that we at European level have been trying to deal with. And you see the knee-jerk reaction of many people, many politicians has been, where do we get the gas from? Yeah? It's been, where is the LNG terminal going to come from? With which other third party can we make contracts to get gas into the European Union? The knee-jerk reaction has not been, how can we save more energy? How can we become more energy efficient? And that, in a nutshell, is sort of the struggle that we face every day, is that we have to, in that sense, compete, I would say, with politicians and with policymakers that have other views about what is the best policy response. And that has been, so far, where do we get the molecules from? Renewables, obviously, that's an important response. And then there's also energy efficiency. We simply need to do the same things with far less energy.
Right.
And in an ideal world, those things should be balanced and should play, have an equal role, I would say, bearing in mind that there's cost associated with all of that. So that's you mentioned energy efficiency first. That's a principle that we're trying to get traction for, I would say, and the idea being that if you start making investments with an impact on energy, you should look at energy efficiency measures as part of your investment decision. It's not saying energy efficiency should always be the first thing that you do, but it says if you think about networks, if you think about renewable investments, you should also look at, well, what is the capacity that we really need, thinking about energy efficiency as one of
I had
the
a
measures.
talk with the E&R network on industry. The E&R is of national energy agencies. And they were so excited. They said, we have so much work to do to get ready to use the resilience and recovery money, or is it recovery and resilience money? So do you see that playing a big role in energy efficiency measures?
Yeah, so we have seen, if you look at all the plans that the member states have submitted and the money that they want to spend, we see a significant amount of money going to, I would say, the clean energy transition. So that's renewables, that's energy efficiency, both in industry, buildings, transport, for example. To give you an example, I think off the top of my head that for buildings, building renovation, it amounts to over 60 billion euros invested in that out of the resilience and recovery facility. So that's a lot of money.
Does anybody else, in your countries, do people complain there should be more coming from Brussels or from the EU? Or
Less, typically.
More money, less regulation, very easy.
Okay. Look, take a seat here. Let's get Bettina on next, and then we will keep this thing going. I just want to point out a couple little. I was in a webinar earlier this year, and we had the rapporteur for the industry strategy talking, and he said, all aspects of decarbonizing energy-intensive industries, not the SMEs, are expensive, and industry needs support. New infrastructure is key, but cost will be considerable, and they need support from the public sector, okay? So this is what they were saying. Funny thing, huh? And
Sorry. Yes, so I don't disagree that industry needs support, and it needs probably more support than that we're able to give. But it's clear that public funding will never be sufficient to achieve the clean energy transition in industry.
Right. I'd like to introduce now Bettina Dorndorf from KfW. I've mentioned her before. She's got some very interesting news from yesterday. You know, a new study or a new survey that's just come out in Germany, plus also the work that she's done on the taxonomy and where that stands, in fact, from that survey. Please, Bettina.
Workshop on financing the industrial transformation. So actually, what does it mean? What are we talking about? I felt the need to define a little bit the starting point. When we look at European industrial transformation, whom are we talking about? So we have a very high degree of fragmentation in the European industrial sector. So if on the top of my head, like more than 90% of the European corporates are small or very small companies. So a high degree of fragmentation. This is our starting point, characterizing the question, what does financing for the industrial transformation actually mean? What does it need? What are the aspects involved in topics to consider? So with this in mind, investment capabilities and priorities, investment needs differ significantly from sector to sector, from company to company. And today we have an environment of crisis, rising energy costs and inflation are endangering the existence of many corporates these days. High level of uncertainty is also characterizing the investment environment for them. This creates not really a strong motivation for corporate climate protection investments. So this is our starting point. And what I can show you today is a climate barometer, which actually was published yesterday by KfW. It is the result of a survey among 80, on the basis of 85,000 companies, small and large, in Germany. And the timing, the period during which the survey has been conducted was early 2022 until September 2022, and the results came out yesterday. So, in a nutshell, what do we learn with regard to financing the industrial transformation? Only 10% of the corporates aim at climate neutrality at all. This means that 90% of the corporates do not have climate neutrality as a strategic objective, or do not see climate neutrality as a strategic objective.
Is that a surprise? Did you expect that?
Well, let me first just summarize the main finding, and then we can ask, is it surprising or not? Sorry, Rod.
No problem.
So 50% do not know about the concept, or very little about the concept of climate neutrality. What does it show? It shows there is a great need for information and better understanding. We also see that the higher the impact or the higher the pressure of stakeholder groups on a company, on an industrial corporate, the higher the probability that this corporate looks into climate protection initiative, transparency issues, and obviously this applies to large corporates much more than to small corporates. Corporates want an increased level of promotional finance, grants, not surprising. They point out that they want a reduced degree of uncertainty as regards to the CO2 price, at least this applies to Germany, and shorter amortization periods. And what they also point out as a main hurdle to invest into climate protection is a lack of financial resources available by themselves and qualified staff. So access to finance does not play a major role in this. So we have to state this. Why? Because this is one of the important learnings of the EFIC work, where we always found out that it's not the access to finance, it's the project pipeline and what the actors need to set up suitable energy efficiency or climate protection projects. So let me now ask, does the EU taxonomy and the dynamic sustainability regulation help at all to overcome the hurdles of investment on the ground? So it's more a rhetoric question. I would throw the hypothesis that at this point in time, it does not really help a lot. I showed this slide earlier on this morning during the panel. What we see is a tight schedule of regulatory requirements with a lack of transparency on what has to be reported actually, a lack of preparation time for the companies to establish the necessary processes, a lack of clarity as regards the application of the EU taxonomy, so open operational questions on the one side, on the other side, the requirement to deliver data to their commercial banks because they want to report a green asset ratio which is as shiny as possible. So the breadth and complexity of information which have to be delivered is increasing significantly with the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which will be introduced shortly following the Non-Financial Reporting Directive, which focuses a lot on the EU taxonomy. So all this in combination, the complexity of the current economic situation, energy crisis, rising interest rates, rising prices in general, together with the rising requirements from sustainability regulation, is overburdening the small and medium-sized enterprises. This is what we hear, and there is a lack of good national language information informing people. There's a lack of networking and industry-specific approaches to just tackle the challenges together. And there's another question in the room, which or another hypothesis, which says, well, if we do not deliver to our banks, this will have a negative impact on our financing conditions. So, all in all, financing the industrial transformation from this perspective also means developing an environment where the industrial corporates can tackle, can work on the challenges deriving from regulation, deriving from the economic situation, deriving from reporting requirements. So just a few words on what we did at KfW. At KfW, in order to support the industrial transformation, we developed sector-specific Paris alignment guidelines. So these sector guidelines, they define, not as a big bang, but with a gradual approach, they define the level of CO2 emission reduction which has to be given in order to follow the path towards climate neutrality in 2050. Fraunhofer Institute, Clemens was heavily involved in the development of these sector guidelines. Probably he can explain this much better than I can. So this is what we developed in order to make sure that the promotional finance portfolio follows a path towards gradually reducing greenhouse gas emission and avoiding lock-in effects. So far, we have developed this for a couple of very greenhouse gas intensive sectors: shipping, automotive, steel, power generation, buildings, aviation, and oil and gas. It is actually in the process of being developed. So financing the climate, the industrial transformation for me means reducing the regulatory complexity, being a bit less demanding, and stepping away from more and more regulatory requirements which do not have to tackle the problems on the ground.
Thank you very much. You mentioned this was a climate barometer, but we have an energy crisis. And did that sway things at all? You know, the problems with gas coming from Russia or the increase in price? I mean, this is climate. And I don't know how much the people being surveyed made that distinction.
The survey was conducted actually this year.
Yeah.
So with all the current elements and effect of the crisis in mind.
Right.
Is there any specific?
No, I just was curious, just that if people compartmentalize the problems, that oh, this is how we deal with climate, but this is how we deal with the energy crisis, and so I didn't know if there was a compartmentalization.
No, actually not.
Okay.
I mean, the energy crisis and the energy price crisis forms part of the current situation.
Now, what will happen with this survey? Will it go to the government? Like, what? The survey was published yesterday. Is there going to be big debates and discussions? Maybe Fraunhofer knows more, or I don't know. What will happen with this now?
Good question, Rod. I only know that yesterday there has been a first press conference to present the results. It is actually brand new. I'm sure it will be presented to the federal ministries, and we will see what kind of conclusions we can draw from these results.
Now, I go back to my question I shouldn't have asked at the time. Were there any surprises?
Good question. depends on the perspective. So are there surprises, were there surprises to me by flipping through the results? Well, it was surprising for me that at least that 50% of the corporates in Germany who responded to the survey, they do not consider climate neutrality at all, or they have very little knowledge about it. So what does this actually show? And I mean, the smaller the company is, the lesser the degree of knowledge, obviously. Right. What does it show? It shows a big need for industry associations, but also all other stakeholders involved to make sure there is the right level of information and discussion and knowledge building available. Another surprise for me was the fact that a certain percentage would like to see a greening of the financial industry. So that surprised me. But as
why do you think the financial industry is also green, or is it just irrelevant?
No. There is a big debate on greening the financial industry and green finance and finance and sustainable finance. That's why I was surprised that the survey created the link between greening the financial industry and industrial investments into climate protection.
Okay.
But, yeah.
Okay. Robert, I mean, does the word greening the financial industry come up in Brussels at all? Oh.
I mean, yes, of course, there's discussion, and the taxonomy debate very much goes into that direction. It's about what is it, are financial institutions now going to be asked to show that a certain percentage of their portfolio is green, whatever that means. So I think that the taxonomy debate has really sort of strengthened, I think, those arguments for financial institutions to look at their portfolios and to look at what it can be considered green and not green. And of course, there has always been sort of investor pressure, I would say, on financial institutions and also in terms of their investments, whether it's pension funds or other or banks. Okay.
Great. We have a question from Aaron. Oh, yes, please.
Yeah, I would like to respond on this. You say that financial institutions have to report on what's green or what's not green. So just for the audience, under the taxonomy regulation, there are new reporting and information requirements being created for corporates, including financial institutions. And the main KPI for financial institutions is the so-called green asset ratio. So what banks have to start to reporting these days is the so-called green asset ratio. However, the problem is that this green asset ratio is calculated in a way that it takes out certain kinds of business. So that makes it difficult to compare from one commercial bank to another. And but nevertheless, showing a shiny green asset ratio, showing it as good as possible, seems still to be one of the objectives. And it is not about what is green or what's not green. It's about first, does as a bank, my economic activities, are they in line with the activities of the EU taxonomy? And if this is the case, as a next step, are they in line with the criteria of the EU taxonomy when talking about taxonomy alignment? So just to refine a little bit, if you don't mind.
We have a question from Erwin.
Thank you very much for your interesting presentation. It's more actually a consideration rather than a question about the low share of companies having targets towards climate neutrality. And I think that the politicians and others have failed to explain the challenge of reaching climate neutrality to the wide public, and that they need to act, both citizens and business owners, and also within the framework of the energy crisis with the high prices that we had. I was waiting for the Minister of Energy to take the megaphone and saying, people, the prices are high. Those who can afford it, it's now the time to invest in your house and to make it more energy friendly, and also to invest in solar panels, and which didn't happen. I think we need to have a buy-in of the wide public in the challenge in climate neutrality, and that we all need to act.
Was this a question?
No, I think this was raising some
Yes.
frustration in him. Clemens, I'd like your view. Were there any surprises? You did a lot of the work.
Yeah, I was. No, we didn't do that work on the survey.
No,
so, but having seen that, I was pretty surprised if you put up exactly that slide, that so few companies have the perception that they really invested in green investments. So that it's. The amount surprised me, because companies are doing a lot, and sometimes I think, because you asked in particular for climate protection activities, people do very often not perceive, and we've seen that in other surveys, investments in energy efficiency as a climate protection investment. So that's one thing. When they think of climate protection, they think of solar PV and all that stuff, but they don't think of renovating their office buildings actually, and perhaps that's a thing where we need to also build on the narrative that energy efficiency is climate protection in the end. So that might be one thing which should be made more clear to companies, that this is a clear resilience topic. And I've been on a panel, last comment on that, last week on the Association of the German Traders. And there it was very clear. They said, okay, the companies which invested 10 years ago in green buildings, they were labeled as weirdos in the community. So why do you invest in green buildings? And today they are the ones who are resilient. And for me, that's clear that it's not a niche topic for the companies anymore, but it's crucial to ensure their economic future.
Yeah, the question is, how do we get these messages across more? And you'd think that we would have, but anyway, Bettina, thank you very much. We will now bring in Tatjana Bastille. Thank you very much. And Tatjana, the European Investment Bank's the world's largest development bank, isn't it?
It is indeed.
You know, and it plays such a crucial role, and we'd like to hear what you have to say.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Pleased to be here. And I will take Rob's idea to make this as interactive as possible. So, as Bettina, when I was asked to participate, I thought energy investment in energy efficiency and transition in industry, what does that mean? And what came to my mind is that it's really a story of unrealized potential. We have, as you've heard, been very active, all of us, on energy efficiency on the EFIG group for a number of years now, and still we are here agreeing with each other, access to finance, not a major buyer, but having a pipeline of projects that matches the finance available. It's definitely up there. So I have a few questions for you today that I'd like to put on the table. I'll consider this a little bit as Chatham House, even though we are recorded. So please do interrupt and share your ideas, either when I'm speaking or or afterwards, as you wish. My presentation complements really nicely yours, Bettina, because I'm going to be looking more at what is the finance products that would actually support both the development of the project pipeline and financing those projects themselves. So at the European Investment Bank, really large development bank for the EU, on average 60 billion of investments per year. Actually, energy efficiency is not that bad. It's doing really well. We went from 1.1 billion in 2012 to 5.8 end of 2020. I didn't have the very latest number. So you think, great progress. However, really one big laggard, industry. I kind of took various angles, and the bottom line is only industry is 4%. If you then take intermediated finance, so banks, we arrive at 11% of this energy efficiency percentage, so still very limited. So what is also very surprising is that we've seen all of the studies that show that actually the potential for energy efficiency in industry and in SMEs is really large. And we estimated in some study we done in the AB that there's about 60% of unrealized potential that is there for somehow match these projects with the finance offering. So the EIB established please?
Just a question on that. Is it because industry just self-finances it and it comes out their bottom line, their revenues, so they don't need bank financing for a lot of the energy efficiency? So you're just not seeing that in the numbers?
I think there is the point that, do you see it in the number? I think it's a very good question. The other is, maybe they do energy efficiency when they do process improvements, and so how do you capture that? Fully agree with you. Though I don't think that I don't have the numbers, but indeed we would have to look at what is the percentage of EIB investment that finance industry per se, and that, unfortunately, it's not transparent how much of that is energy efficiency. So it's an important point. And the second one is, I think there is some element of self-financing, but I do think there's a lot of bank finance also that goes in the industry, especially in the process investment. So we're back to lack of visibility, what is actually the data. And they probably don't know themselves. They don't extract from a large project what is the budget for energy efficiency versus the budget for the process improvement per se. So the EIB, I joined about 2.5 years ago, and as I joined, they were establishing a task force internally to think, how can we do more finance on energy efficiency? And this is where I will put to you some questions that came out of discussion. But again, is to say, we're still asking ourselves, how do we break this gap? And in a nutshell, I would say that the key is simplification. Bettina said too much complexity. One of the message was there's so much complexity in the system. And it's not just the planning process. Access to finance, some people will tell you there is a lot of finance out there, but actually the process to get to it is rather complex. So simplicity is key. Another one, and I think that our colleague will touch on it a bit later as well, is technical assistance. We are still at the stage where you do need to provide technical assistance both to develop the pipeline of projects, but also to the financial intermediaries. We are now providing technical assistance to development banks, but also local banks. And we are seeing that there's a crucial element, for example, for them to understand how do I implement the taxonomy, and also to ensure that the way they interpret the taxonomy is robust enough. But that is really crucial. And then in terms of simplification and EBRD, to give them a bit of credit, there's always a bit of a fight between EIB and EBRD. They've developed a number of tools that make it easy for SMEs and industry to access to finance, especially on a small scale. I'll finish my sentence and then I hand over to you. But I think tools are really important. And so we started to do that in the EIB as well. So I'll come to it, but we have what we call now our green eligibility checker. But it's actually proven there's a lot of appetite out there, both from banks, funds, not so much, but also from ESCOs and other promoters. Bettina, you had a question?
Yes, you said that the EIB is starting to support local and development banks to tackle the challenges deriving from the EU taxonomy. So I wonder how you do this and whether the EIB is the right party to address this task. Because we were asked as a national promotional bank what we could do to support the corporate sector to address the complexity of the EU taxonomy, and we said, well, we are actually not the right party to do this. It should actually be more industry associations plus auditors to create and develop a good basis of knowledge. So That's why it was interesting to me to hear.
What we have done, to give you a very precise, when I say development bank quite broadly, we are working in Hungary, for example, with a credit rating agency, which also happens to have a large financial branch, and they are developing a green investment framework. And so we are providing to our advisory group technical assistance to help them ensure that they have an understanding that will match, for example, the EIB, BRD, or KfW requirements for us to work in partnership with them. So very often when we do that, we do it within the context of an operation. So when we have an operation with, let's say, these Hungarian credit rating agencies, we also add an element of technical assistance, and we see there's a lot of appetite out there. So it's not done out of the blue, if you'd like. Obviously, there's a corporate interest. Let's be transparent here. But it's about market transformation. And I agree. I think we do have a lot of sector associations here today. It has to be a shared burden, a bit like where the finance comes from. Market transformation also needs to be shared among, you need to help your industry members, and we are trying also to do our bit there. So in terms of what the task force has identified, the very first one was, again, down to having a much stronger technical assistance program, and that having a program is key. In the EIB, we have the ELENA program that helps both financial institutions but also ESCOs and promoters. We have the EU Advisory Hub, which is doing a lot of project development assistance. And recently, under the InvestEU fund, there is an InvestEU Advisory Hub, which is a very important component of this very large new facility. In terms of the finance aspect, simplification of eligibility was one of the elements that we identified. And we did do a lot of interviews, which are previous and existing clients, as well as with our let's say, fellow development banks. So simplification of eligibility, which is always problematic because the criteria have to be robust enough to be labeled green, but how do you actually streamline that? Simplification of monitoring. We were told that our monitoring process is really too strict. So we're again thinking how to make that more easier to implement, more affordable as well, without losing any of the, at least, we are audited. When we say we do something green, we have auditors that come and check on us, because of course it's our corporate target as a bank, so it has to be very robust. But also elements like, I think I saw on your slide that they wanted also shorter amortization periods for the goods. We are looking at how to extend the allocation periods, how to have longer maturity of loans. And we were in an environment where interest rates were extremely low, so offering lower interest rates was not really value add anymore. That will very likely change. The cumul rule, we recently were able to waive the cumul rule, which is very important in the context of Repower EU. So we will be in a position to do a bit more of grant with loan, so we can better coordinate with the with some of the funds in the EU and try to make bigger projects using both the grant and the loan components. We were quite pleased with that because we have heard it adds a lot of complexities in the definition of the financial product by having these requirements. So those were our findings, and I'm very curious to hear that as you were a number of you are on the other side, you were trying to get a loan potentially, or some of your members were trying to get some finance. Do you find that any of those speak to you? The other question that we had was, who is going to deliver this provision of finance? And of course, in industry, we have the industrial partners. The EIB does direct investment loans with the industrial partners, as you've mentioned. How much of that is energy efficiency? The ESCOs, very, very big target, though it remains relatively small in numbers, but we have a nice example of direct investment in ESCOs. Again, when we do that, I find that when you look at the percentage of the investment that goes to industrial energy efficiency, it's not always very high. And then what we call in the EIB intermediated finance, which KfW does as well. We give money to a bank or a fund to on-lend to the final beneficiary. It can be an SME. We do a lot of SME finance. I've been involved in that quite a bit recently. It can be an ESCO, or it can be, in some cases, also an industry. At the moment, banks who provide this intermediated finance, going back to your point about the green asset ratio, and I agree, a lot of teething problems now. You have announcements which you have to look with a lot of care, because what is just a selection of the NACE sector of the taxonomy, it's all very good, but you actually need to be aligned with the criteria to be taxonomy aligned. But what we have seen is that there's a very strong growing appetite of banks to develop green investment product or green loan products, because unlike you, what I have seen is the starting point of those who are starting to measure these green asset ratios. And for banks, because a lot of SMEs are excluded, they have this alternative green asset ratio. And we're speaking about 0.5%, 1%. The numbers are really, really low. So they are afraid that in time it will become mandatory. And so we do see a very large number, whether it's in Italy, in Spain, in Hungary, in France, of banks developing this product. They all think it's the new thing. And of course, now with the energy crisis, there's a very large appetite. So I was very curious to know, have you heard being on the receiving end of a marketing campaign where a bank contacted you as an industry or SME to say, have you heard we have this new green investment program to help you in the current context of the energy crisis?
Has anybody heard this? Or is this all new?
No? So still early stages, but watch this space, because we are definitely working on those. And with those banks, we then provide technical assistance, Cinea and others. And I can tell you that they do need hand-holding, because some of them think, I'll just invest in the sectors that are covered with the taxonomy. And you're like, well, it's going to be a bit more precise than that. But of course, they do have the resources, and they know that they will be audited on that. So they are doing it quite seriously. On those elements that I have mentioned in terms of how to make a financial product more attractive or more adapted, if I could say, to your needs, is there anything that speaks to you, or do you think there's any gap from what I have said here?
We're not getting much reaction from the audience.
No, I'm trying hard, though.
Yeah, I know. You're asking questions. I mean...
So have you, any of your members, because I imagine that you might not be yourself asking for finance, but is that, for example, questions that you get from your members saying we're really struggling to get access to finance? Or, like Bettina said, it's not something that they're looking for? Though at the moment, I'm telling you, if you live in Belgium, I'm sure they're asking themselves, because everybody's going to check which grants and loans are available when your bill is multiplied by 4, sometimes 6.
Simon, in your company, okay, I know you do a lot of work in Britain, so that doesn't quite count, but I mean, is financing ever a major issue in some of the projects? You quite hear a lot in Belgium too. So.
Yeah, it's an issue, of course, but I don't think the availability of money is normally the problem, if you see what I mean. It's then, does the project fit? What's the counterparty risk look like? Certainly some industries are pretty difficult to invest in at times because they're cyclical. So I've done a lot of work in the pigments business. Every 4 years it's a disaster zone, and 4 years later it's a fantastic success. So it makes it really risky to put long-term finance into those sorts of sectors. So I'm interested in your perception of counterparty risk. And you might not see it because you do through the intermediaries, but I think it's
exactly. And so what we do at the moment to do more climate finance, because the EIB has a very big target by 2025, but we do through the banks, we are targeting SMEs. So we are working with our SME products and adding what we call a climate window. And so we are adding a component where we're asking the banks to put 20 or 30% of our loan directly into green finance. And so we assume that the counterparty risk is not going to be different than the one that we actually used to have with those SMEs. So the team who looks at counterparty risk have been looking at that now for, ever since the bank existed really, and the EIF for a very, very long time. So we don't see that as the issue. The issue is there, as you say, an appetite on the other end, and photovoltaic panels is easy. We're really speaking about the difficulty of energy efficiency. And again, in those climate actions, the proportion of energy efficiency is always really small. And this is why we're trying to see how can we make it more attractive for SMEs to move into that sector as well. But again, some of that might be done without being labeled. But we are careful also, as you said, in terms of process. We don't consider that if you triple or quadruple your process and your absolute energy efficiency increases, we don't count that as energy efficiency either. You cannot have a program whereby you end up using more energy, then we will finance it as an industrial improvement, but not as an energy efficiency improvement.
But this is one of the problems we had when we started EFIG. I mean, it was so easy to put a boundary around a renewable energy project. It's not so easy to put a boundary around an energy efficiency target, and often they can be integrated. You're increasing production capacity at the same time. It's more energy efficient. So how do you make that distinction? We have Anne first.
Yes, I was.
So you should say who you are,
yes,
because Tanya won't know.
Anne Beazer, I'm founder of a company who's helping large industries saving money on energy consumption and on CO2 emissions.
In Flanders?
Yeah, in Belgium and a bit abroad, but mainly here. So what I have noticed with industrial companies is that the energy efficiency is a technical department issue, and technical departments, they have budgets. And they don't do loans, so it's a principle that has not gone through there. But I do hope this will change, because we see the energy efficiency topic moving to the strategic topics of a company. So I hope, as it is now discussed with the CFO and with CEO. Levels that this might change, but as it has been done, it's in a way it makes sense that there is no filtering through of loans to this department. The only way it got in was through ESCO type of services, where the financing and the expertise came in one package. But it's always a very limited part. It's only the relighting, it's only the heating, because other types of production are not very predictable or not predictable enough for a bank. So that was just things going through my mind where you were
it's interesting, because for many years we've had this discussion, but there was always a question that energy efficiency needed to be financed alone and it needed to have a payback. I don't know how many times I say we should kill the energy payback. We don't count it on so many things. We want to have a return on investment, but it's not an energy efficiency payback. When we do a lot of those SME finance, we don't look at the energy efficiency payback. It's a corporate loan. And they then assess how they're going to make their companies efficient, and out of the revenues from their business, they will pay on the energy efficiency loan rather than purely on the energy savings. And I think, the energy efficiency payback worked really well back in the days when you had really large industries. It will work perfectly at the moment with 4 times the energy bills. But in the normal environment, it actually compartmentalizes, as you say, to one very specific little team who then, when it goes to the CEO, they're like, what's your payback? Yeah, no, I agree fully.
We have 2 more questions, then we'll have to
and then I'll hand
go
over
to the Innovation Fund. Okay.
My name is Henrik Adler Nielsen. I'm working for the Danish Energy.
Yes, we can hear you well, actually.
I
think you...
Okay, no, that's fine.
For Chatham House
but
rules, you need to...
I've been working as an energy auditor, energy advisor for almost 30 years now. And it has been, especially with the smaller companies, an issue that they were afraid of their bank, because they probably had not had the best economy, and when the economy was a little poor, then the bank started saying, "Oh no," and blah 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 blah, and then it never got to get to talking about money from EIB. So I think that a lot of it is still due to a lack of knowledge. Also, I mean, the banks, they are really tied up. I mean, you cannot ask them of anything anymore before they say, "Oh, we have to calculate this, and this the regulation says we have to do this and that," and so on. And then they just forget about it. And as Anne also said, it really have to be brought up to the strategical level in any company, whether it's a small or bigger one, that investments in energy efficiency is one of the best investments you can do at all. Then I have another question. Do you have a sort of reinsurance on the money that is lended out? Because I know from Denmark we have some of the funds there, also state financed, and then they say we have to have a very high interest, because most of them, they succeed, but some does not. And if they don't succeed, the other ones have to, the money for income from the other projects have to cover the ones that is going bad, instead of having a reinsurance thing to cover that instead of these high interests.
This is where our friend Robert come in. The EU gives guarantees. So the EIB, we pass on a number of guarantees from the EU, which are really important, I agree. And in fact, the banks are there's a very large appetite for those guarantees. So in effect, it is the EU, the member states, that actually play that role of reinsurance. It is you and me. And if I may say one thing, because I do feel that we need to leave the floor, on the nice transition, the other bodies who can do it are the funds, and I know we're going to speak about innovation funds, and so we do a lot of work with funds in the EIB. I mean, it was a small business and in growing, but under the InvestEU, you know, the Recovery and Resilience Fund is a very large. There's a very large provision of money. Some of that is funneled to KfW, so maybe. So no, then EIB, but then we have the InvestEU guarantee, which is extremely important. And now with REPowerEU, where we have now increased, well, at least recommendation for an increased target on energy efficiency, we have very large budgets to allocate towards climate action under InvestEU, which are those kind of guarantees. And there is an appetite for that. And so we do have a climate and infrastructure facility and the innovation fund that the next speaker will explain to you.
I think you want to react to Tatjana, and then we'll have Erwin, and then...
I just wanted to share an information with you. Yes, there is a very small market for specific insurance companies looking at energy efficiency projects. One of them is called Climate Protect, and but I know that there are others out there. One, I don't remember the name, in Great Britain. So there is this niche market out there, which for reasons I can't understand has not grown significantly, because they look into the projects and into the savings, and they would not assure the project if it was not commercially viable.
Dushan, we had a speaker on that, didn't we, on a conference several years ago? Yeah.
I mean, we've had a few in the context of EFIC and to be fair, they're silent, but most ESCOs have insurance. They do take insurance. Those products exist. And they are now part of the ecosystem of energy efficiency, very, very much so. And they are crucial, isn't it? Without that at the beginning, the banks will not be comfortable if you don't have an insurance behind it. Yeah. It had a cost, of course, there's a transaction cost.
Everyone's going to ask a very short question so we get onto the innovation fund.
That's it.
You know, it's nice. When was the last time you were at an in-person conference?
I know.
I think we all want to talk. It's great.
Yes. Erwin Cornelius, and I would like to build upon what Anne said. I think rate of return or payback time does play a role in here. If an energy efficiency investment is a strategic investment, very often it is part of a bigger investment and not seen as much as energy efficiency investment. And if it's not then very likely there are restrictions and a payback time that are allowed by the board of the company, and then there is no need for financial instrument to intervene, because then they can fund themselves. But there is a policy push to also have more energy efficiency investments in industry, push from the Energy Efficiency Directive. At the other side, I also see a push to have financial instruments, and also building on Battina's presentation also this morning. And I'm wondering how in the field both can work together, and how both can be part of the same pipeline. But perhaps let's have first
I think
speak about the innovation.
Georgia will be able to address that, but I think that's very much what EFIG is about, and so it shows we still have work to do. So very much unrealized potential, which with the Innovation Fund we are working towards realizing, so please.
Thank you, Tatiana. We have Georgia Caroli.
Right.
From Cenea to speak on the Innovation Fund. And we didn't realize until recently, but Georgia's office is about 200 meters from our office in Brussels.
Yeah, it is.
Anyway, we'll have to visit.
Yeah, you should.
Okay, please.
Hi. I have a few slides. So Cenea is one of the executive agency of the Commission, and we are one of the agencies that help and contributes to the EU Green Deal. And we have a number of programs, and also my colleagues later on will talk about them. And one of them is the Innovation Fund. The Innovation Fund is one of the largest worldwide funds that contributes to the decarbonization of the European industry through highly innovative projects. And the objective of the Innovation Fund is indeed, as we mentioned, many of you mentioned, is to minimize the risk for the investors and also for the bank that might support the investors. The Innovation Fund focuses on 4 main areas. That is all the energy-intensive industry that are covered by the EU ETS, renewable energy, carbon capture, usage and storage, and energy storage. And the objective, as I mentioned, is just to scale up clean tech. It's key that we use funds that come from the emission trading system. So roughly, I think it's 450 million allowances that will go to the Innovation Fund till 2030. And at the rate that is nowadays, that represents roughly 38 billion euros until 2030. And it covers and supports industry, both small, medium, but also large industry, to invest in decarbonization. We have 2 types of grants, what we call a small scale and the large scale grant. So what it means small scale is to capital investment up to 7.5 million. And the large scale is everything is above. So there are no upper limit. The grants cover 60% of what we call it relevant cost. And we have 2 calls per year, one in spring and one in autumn. Single applicant can apply, so one single industry can apply, obviously. And we also have the support of the AIB with the project development assistance that provide help to a project promoter that the project is not sufficiently mature yet to apply for the fund. Yes?
Sorry to interrupt. Just
No, go ahead.
I'm Simon Minette from Chalik Energy. I look at the bottom right corner there, and a lot of SMEs, 2.5 million is a lot of money.
Yes.
So, and is there anything below that, or are we in the wilderness for that?
No, I mean, there might be other funding projects, especially Horizon, that are more research or any other program, but the Innovation Fund goes from 2.5 to 7.5 million. Sorry.
It's okay.
Just need to know.
I have to think big then.
Yeah, to be ambitious.
No, but on that, could 3 companies go in together? I mean,
Yes.
that they're doing a sort of a joint research project, like 3 from, Sweden or something like that?
Yes, of course. There can be more than more company that
Okay.
join together, and we are talking with the Innovation Fund of not so much research, although there has to be highly innovative. We're talking for the large-scale project have to be first of a kind in Europe, but yes, they can, if they prove it to be highly innovative. Of course, they can join.
Okay.
And we had so far, the program was launched in 2020, and we had so far 4 calls, and 2 what we call large scale and 2 small scale. All in all, we had 700 participants between the different, and now we have a portfolio of 57 projects that is now growing, because soon will be launched the result of the small scale 2021. And so we have all in all contributed to roughly 3 billion euros in fund. And we have, as I mentioned, 37 projects in many categories, among the 4 that I mentioned before. And we cover many countries. We are up to 20 countries, if I'm not wrong, and many different beneficiaries. So as you said, if you do the math, we have many projects with multi-beneficiaries. I'm here today because I'm thrilled to announce at the beginning of November, we'll launch our 3rd large-scale call, and it's for 3 billion euros. So 3 billion, so it's very large. It's a single stage, and you have till the 16th of March to apply. We have 4 topics that I will just go into it briefly later on. And the project are evaluated by independent experts following a set of award criteria. The first one is the degree of innovation. We discussed how important it is for the European industry to show innovation and to be there with breakthrough innovation. The second is GHG emission avoidance. That is the ultimate objective of the fund. Project maturity, scalability, and cost efficiency. As I mentioned before, we work with a lump sum, so the cost has not to be justified, and up to 60% of the relevant cost. So in this call of 3 billion, we have 4 topics. The first 3 topics are linked to Repower EU. So the first one is innovative electrification and hydrogen applicants in industry. I was in the first panel today where we were talking a lot about decarbonization, about hydrogen industry in industry. So that would be a topic available for this kind of project. And we have 1 billion euro available for that. The second topic is innovative clean tech manufacturing, among them electrolyzer, but also renewable energy technology as also energy storage technology. For this topic, we have 0.7 billion available. The third topic is a mid-sized pilot project. That is where the project can be less mature compared to the other, can go more into research and a small-scale industrial demonstration. We have a budget of 0.3, and that is the only call that has a cap at 40 million investment per project. And the fourth topic is what we call the general decarbonization windows. Is the one that is going on since 2020, where all the projects can apply with those specific rules. So we have, for all of you that are thrilled, will find more information about which are the projects that are ongoing. We have an Innovation Fund dashboard where you can see for different countries, for different sectors, the projects that are already ongoing and have been funded. We have also country fact sheets where you can just check in your country which are the ongoing projects. And I'm here also to advise for all the people interested to join us on the 29th and the 30th. We have our info sessions for this third large-scale call, where we will be able to give you much more detail about. We also have on the 19th of January a Financing Clean Tech Conference, And yes, please don't forget the deadline of the 16th of March for any of you who want to apply. Yeah, the last slide. We are searching always for experts. Many of you are experts in your sectors. We are searching GOG expert, technical expert, financial expert. So please join us in the next evaluation of this thrilling third large-scale call. I finish.
Thank you very much. Now, what may be an innovation in Greece may not be an innovation in Sweden. Because there'll be different countries, different companies are at different stages. How do the evaluators deal with that?
Okay, here there is a difference between small-scale project and large-scale project. Small-scale projects, the innovation has to be, as a matter of example, first of a kind in the country.
Okay.
While large-scale project has to be very innovative at European level.
Okay. Okay. We have a question.
Ola Hansen here.
Hello.
I heard your colleagues at DG Klima this Monday also say second of its kind, which made me really happy, I think, because this first of a kind is really a trap we might fall into, I think.
Yes.
Because first of its kind doesn't mean that every other product then is commercially viable. I think, especially considering the policies and measures we have in the EU today with free allocation still in ETS. So even we wouldn't like to need to fund even a tenth of its kind in many cases. So I know there's a delegated act with the instructions, but I think really to not say that we only need innovation. I think what we really need is commercialization of innovation, going from TRL level 8 to 9, and doing that for many projects rather than focusing on lifting from lower levels up to 7 or 8.
Thank you, indeed. So we are talking indeed in the Innovation Fund of large-scale commercialization and proof of projects, indeed. Thank you for your comment.
Great. Yes, please.
Yeah, maybe to the panel. I'm Tom van Dreel from TNO Energy Research in the Netherlands. I've seen a lot of interesting contributions on how to finance industrial decarbonization and what to finance. I think the role of the banks could also be in what not to finance in industrial. Yeah. And I haven't heard anything about that up to now. And I think that's where you can be very significant.
Tom, we have 3 minutes left. We're not going to get into that, I'm afraid. Unfortunately, but we have Tatiana would like. No, I know.
You know, I call myself the police of the EIB. In our team, we are very much we not finance many more projects than we finance projects. But I do like your point. I think we don't emphasize that enough. There are very large numbers of projects that come and they don't fit. The EIB has to follow the EU policy. We have very strict criteria. We actually, I think KfW, I don't know about you, but we are seen as very annoying financiers because we have all of those criteria. We believe that we can offer value add, and so this is why we are able to do it, but very much so. So there is a number of projects. And I think, you said it yourself, those projects which are not good enough, we can still offer project development assistance to strengthen them. And what we said at the beginning about it's not a lack of finance, but it's very much about matching the risk appetite of the finance product that exists with the project. And that is where this technical assistance and project development assistance is key, because there are a lot of projects which we cannot finance based on our very strict criteria.
Yes, and I would like to add on this from the perspective of KfW. We have a dedicated exclusion list describing the sectors and topics where we do not invest into with promotional funds, such as, for instance, starting from atomic industry to weapons to tobacco and so on and so forth. So there is an exclusion list, and on top of it, very clear technical specifications which have to be met in order to have access to promotional finance.
Robert, final word to you. Oh, is there a question? Oh, I should have expected one from Erwin. I didn't see you, sorry.
A question to you. I remember from Nerd 300 that there were also quite a lot of projects in the project pipeline on carbon capture and storage, but it didn't materialize. Now we do see CCS being picked up. What's the difference here? Why does it happen right now, and why didn't happen 10 years ago?
It's a very interesting question. Actually, I'm not sure I have the answer. What I can tell you is that for our experience in these last 2 years, we have many projects that apply for CCU and especially CCS projects, especially in the hard-to-abate, obviously in the hard-to-abate sectors, like cement industries, as was also mentioned in some other presentation before. And we see more and more, thanks also to other programs and the actualization or really sites of carbon with the Northern Light projects, and many also harbors like Antwerp, Rotterdam, they are developing facilities, so that surely does help.
With the enthusiasm you see here from Georgia, you've got to apply, you know?
Yeah, you should.
The last from the floor is to Dushan, okay? And then Robert.
Okay, thank you, Rod. And my question is kind of to Robert, but I hope I'm not totally off the ball. I mean, the event, is about financing energy transition for industries. I'm from EIP, which is Energy Efficient Industrial Processes, and lots of our members are SMEs. And at the recent State of the Union, we heard about SME relief package, which from the reading from the outside, has a provisions about not just paying SMEs to pay bills, but also to provide some drivers for energy transition and energy efficiency. And we haven't heard so much about it, so I just wanted to kind of bring it back and say, is anything happening, or can members expect some help on actually not in the projects which will come in 5 years or 10 years, but something which might happen next year?
And then we'll let Robert answer that, and then we have to get ready for the plenary after that.
Thank you. Well, I mean, the answer to this question is very simple. I don't know. I mean, this was an announcement. SMEs and SME financing sits often with colleagues in DG Grow. There's a lot of work, I'm sure, ongoing, but I cannot give you any details, although I will try to follow up with you bilaterally after in order to see if I can dig out something. I mean, maybe just as a sort of a reflection of the debate, I mean, there's not really a problem with financing in the sense that there is enough money around. It's getting it to the right place at the right time, and it's also clear that there's also diversity in Europe in this sector. So I think from our perspective, what we have already been reflecting on is, do we need to sort of go down into member states and also engage with national governments and try and national banks and through the EIB and our partners and be more hands-on, let's say, on the ground in order to try and resolve some of these issues that are out there. And we are trying with the coalition, which is a sort of a follow-up of EFIG, to bring member states on board and to try and create and develop that national component of what we have been doing so far at EU level. So I'm sort of hearing that is indeed something that's necessary.
Okay. Well, that's encouraging. I mean, the thing is that this is a long-term problem, and we need long-term solutions. So we just have no choice. And it's also a bumpy road. Nobody expected Ukraine. Nobody expected Russia. Nobody expected the pandemic. So I mean, it's a very bumpy road that we're all on, and we have to be able to adapt to it. Georgia, Tatiana, Bettina, Robert, thank you so much. This has been great. I think this has been really fun.